My name is Nola. The retirement banner stretched across our Beaumont living room said congratulations. Hal in red letters that Mom had ordered from Party City and taped up crooked. Folding chairs borrowed from our church lined every wall. My dad's coworkers filled the kitchen, plates balanced on their knees, laughing too loud over stories I'd heard secondhand my whole life. I'd flown in from Nashville that morning on a red-eye because the daytime fares were steep, and I'd told myself I came for my dad. Some part of me knew better even before the wheels touched down. Mom climbed up on the step stool she kept by the refrigerator and clinked a spoon against her wine glass until the room hushed. 32 years, she said, voice swelling with the kind of pride she usually reserved for my brother. 32 years this man got up before sunrise and kept this family going. She teared up and people clapped, and then her eyes swept the room and found me in the corner near the window the way they always did, not warmly. More like she was confirming I was still occupying space that could have been used for something better. Some of our kids turned out exactly like we always dreamed, she said, tilting her glass toward Brett, who grinned from the couch. Then she paused, and I could see her mouth curve. And some of them, well, a soft laugh. The room laughed back because they didn't understand what she meant, but I did. I had been decoding that laugh my entire life. I set my glass down on the TV stand, walked over to my dad, and shook his hand the way you'd shake the hand of someone you deeply respect but rarely get to talk to. Congratulations, I told him. He looked at me, actually looked, for about 2 seconds, and then his eyes slid away towards someone calling his name from the kitchen. I went through the side door and stood in the driveway in the warm October dark. The Uber was 4 minutes away. I hadn't touched my overnight bag. I grew up in a 3-bedroom house on the east side of Beaumont, where the yard smelled like cut grass in the morning and petroleum from the refineries a few miles off by afternoon. My brother Brett was 2 years older than me, and from the time he could throw a spiral, our entire family organized itself around his trajectory. Football schedules went on the refrigerator in red marker. His games were family events, not events the family attended, but events the family existed to support. My mom had a custom shirt with his jersey number that she wore to every game, home and away. She kept it washed and folded on top of the dryer like something sacred. I was the other one. I've sat with that sentence long enough now that it doesn't sting anymore. It's just an accurate description of a fact. I wasn't difficult. I made decent grades, stayed out of trouble, set the table without being asked, kept my room clean because I'd learned early that mess drew attention, and attention in our house was rarely good for me. But I wasn't Brett, and in our family, not being Brett was its own category of invisible. My 10th birthday was a Thursday in March. Brett had a regional playoff game that Friday, which meant the whole week belonged to him. Practice schedules, pre-game meals, making sure his uniform was clean and his cleats were broken in. The night before his game, Mom baked a chocolate cake with white frosting and his number in blue gel icing. I watched from the doorway for a while. No one acknowledged that my birthday was the next day. I ate cold leftover spaghetti at the kitchen counter before school and didn't mention it. My dad ruffled my hair when he passed through. That was his version of sorry, and I'd learned to take it. What I really had, the thing that was purely mine, was drawing. Sketchbooks I bought at Dollar General with birthday money from my grandmother in Lufkin, colored pencils organized by hue in a shoebox I kept under my bed. I drew everything: the refinery towers at sunset, the grain of our wooden fence, the letter forms on cereal boxes and road signs, and the backs of receipts left on the counter. I didn't have a word for what I was doing yet. I just knew it was the part of the day that felt like breathing. Mom called it doodling when she noticed it at all. You need to focus on something real, she'd say, walking past the kitchen table where I was bent over a sketch pad. Brett's out there working for his future. You're making pictures. She said it the way you'd say something to a wall, not expecting a response, just depositing the opinion somewhere it would sit. The person who didn't say that was Aunt Dottie, my dad's younger sister, who ran a sign shop out of a converted garage in the Heights. She made vinyl banners for church fundraisers, yards signs for kids turning 16, window lettering for the hardware store on Major Drive. She drove a pickup with a crack in the windshield that she'd been meaning to fix since 2008, and kept her hair in the same braid she'd worn in every family photo I'd ever seen. She started showing up on Saturday mornings when I was 11 or 12, pulling into our driveway and asking if I wanted to come help her at the shop. My mom let me go without much comment because it got me out from underfoot, and because saying no to family required energy she was saving for Brett's recruiting process. In the garage, Aunt Dottie showed me the cutting plotter, how to weed vinyl off the transfer paper, how to kern type so it read cleanly from 30 feet away. She handed me a client order one afternoon, a graduation banner for a family in Port Arthur, and said simply, "Go ahead, try it." I finished it in an hour, no corrections needed. She stood in the doorway with her arms folded, nodding slowly, like she was confirming something she'd already suspected. She never made noise about it. That wasn't her way. She'd slip a new pack of Prismacolor pencils into my bag at the end of the day. She once left a textbook on visual design principles on our kitchen table with a post-it that just said for Nola in her looping handwriting. My mom moved it to the junk drawer without comment. I got into Belmont University's Visual Communication Design program in March of my senior year. Partial scholarship, enough to matter. The acceptance came in a thin envelope that I opened in the parking lot of the Sonic where I worked after school, hands unsteady over a styrofoam cup. I read the letter twice. Then I sat in my car until the drive-through line backed up and someone honked. At dinner, I set the letter on the table between the salt shaker and the printout of Brett's combine stats that his recruiting coordinator had emailed that week. "I got into Belmont," I said, "in Nashville. Partial scholarship." Brett looked up. My dad kept cutting his pork chop. Mom put her fork down and folded her hands on the table, which I recognized as her settling in gesture. "That's nearly 500 miles away," she said. 480. "Don't be smart with me, Nola." She let a beat pass. "Brett has combines all spring. I'll be traveling with him, which means your father's running the house alone, and we need someone here who can handle things." "What things?" "Whatever comes up. That's what family does." She said it like it was obvious, like I was the one who'd missed a step in the logic. "Lamar has programs. You can get a degree in something practical, close to home." My dad looked up for exactly 1 second. "Nashville's a long way off," he said. Then he looked back at his plate. I picked up the acceptance letter, went to my room, and sat on my bed for a long time, staring at the housing forms and the orientation schedule and the map of campus, with the design building marked with a star. Then I opened my laptop and completed everything in the enrollment portal before midnight. Confirmed, registered, accepted. 3 weeks before move-in, Aunt Dottie picked me up to help with a delivery and handed me a debit card when we got to the shop. 800 on it, she said, eyes on the banner she was trimming. "For your first month, moving costs, whatever you need when you get there." She didn't look at me. She didn't make it a moment. That was Aunt Dottie. She just did things cleanly and moved on. I drove to Nashville on a Tuesday in August, leaving at 5 in the morning before anyone else woke up. My car was a 2009 Civic, with the 143,000 miles that I'd bought, with 3 years of Sonic paychecks, and maintained mostly by watching YouTube tutorials in the parking lot of the auto parts store. I'd said goodbye to my dad the night before in the driveway. He hugged me once, quick, solid, and smelled like Old Spice. My mom had gone to bed early. Nashville came through the windshield slowly, the skyline building itself up out of morning haze as I came over the ridge on I-24. I pulled into the campus lot, sat in the car for a few minutes listening to the engine tick, and then got out and unloaded everything myself. The first year was tighter than I'd anticipated, in ways nobody warns you about. Textbooks were expensive, the partial scholarship had gaps. I waitressed Thursday through Sunday at a barbecue place on Broadway, coming to my morning classes still smelling faintly of hickory smoke even after I'd showered. I picked up freelance work through online platforms, small logo jobs, social media graphics, $50 here, $80 there, occasionally $100 when someone needed a brand identity on a budget. I tracked every dollar in a spreadsheet and knew my balance within a few cents at any given hour. I met Jordan in a typography class sophomore year, a guy from Knoxville who worked closely, safe, and precisely and was almost never wrong on the first draft. He was the kind of person who read the instructions before assembling things, which made him maddening in everyday life and invaluable in a design studio. We started studying together, then collaborating, then complaining together about clients who sent inspiration boards of logos they admired, and then asked for something totally original but sort of like these. Sadie came into the picture through Jordan's social orbit, a marketing student who showed up to one of our critique sessions, offered 3 observations that were all exactly right, and kept showing up after that. She could explain why something worked when Jordan and I could only gesture vaguely at the screen and say it just does. She had the kind of clear thinking that makes a creative person feel understood for the first time. The hard part came in the spring of junior year. I'd won a contract to rebrand a mid-sized Nashville restaurant group, 3 locations, proper budget, the kind of project I had started telling people about when they asked how things were going. I was deep into the final phase, 2 months of work accumulated on an external hard drive, when the drive died. Not gradually, immediately, dead. Data recovery quoted me $900 with no guarantee of success. I didn't have $900. I lost the source files. The client was understanding, in the precise, careful way that means they're deciding whether it's worth their time to pursue damages. They didn't pursue damages. They also didn't refer anyone to me. I rebuilt what I could from exported PDFs and screenshots and delivered everything late, and for 2 weeks afterward, I felt hollowed out in a way that had nothing to do with sleep. Jordan brought groceries to my apartment. Sadie sent me $400 over Venmo with a note that said, "Don't stress, pay it when you can." She didn't ask about it again. I paid it back 6 months later and she said, "Oh right, thank you, the way you'd thank someone for passing the salt." I think she'd genuinely forgotten. I won't forget it as long as I live. Third Rail Studio started as a conversation over cheap pizza at Jordan's apartment the following fall. "We're already doing this," he said. "We're just doing it without a name so nobody takes us seriously." He sketched out what it would look like to combine our freelance income, share overhead, file as an LLC, build one portfolio instead of 3 scattered ones. Sadie came on board as the strategy lead. I led creative. Jordan ran operations with the same steady, methodical energy he brought to everything. We signed the lease on a second-floor office above a pizza place on Charlotte Avenue in January of our senior year. 1 room, 2 windows, 3 desks that fit if you were comfortable being close. The building smelled like oregano all day and warm bread from the vents in the morning, and we put a whiteboard on every wall we could reach. Mom called once, sometime in March. Brett had been cut from a practice squad in the spring and was back home. She thought I should know. She thought I should reach out to him. Family lifts each other up, she said. That's what we do. I told her I had a deadline. She made a sound in her throat that I recognized as being filed away for later. The work built slowly, then faster. We won a regional design competition with a poster series for a Nashville arts organization. The award got us a write-up in a local design publication, which opened a conversation with a boutique hotel undergoing renovation downtown, which led to their sister property in Chattanooga. Each project opened the door to the next one, and we learned to move through those doors quickly. We hired 2 junior designers by our 3rd year. We moved to a better space. Sadie started turning away work that didn't fit the direction we were building toward. The Nashville Business Journal ran us in their 40 Under 40 issue the 4th year in. A half-page spread, a photo of the 3 of us in the office, a quote from me about building a practice that solves real problems instead of just making things look expensive. Inquiries doubled in the 2 weeks after publication. We had to set up a wait list. A national brand agency approached us about acquisition the following spring, a firm with offices in New York, Chicago, and Los Angeles that had been watching our hospitality portfolio grow to a dozen properties. Their regional VP came to Nashville on a Wednesday and made a first offer over dinner at the restaurant downstairs from our old office. Jordan negotiated for 4 months. Sadie ran the numbers on every scenario until she could recite them from memory. I signed the term sheet on a Thursday morning in March, pen steady, no hesitation. The wire transferred on a Friday. I paid off everything I owed, set aside money for a foundations I'd been planning in the back of my mind for 2 years, and sent Aunt Dottie a check with a handwritten note for a new truck. No arguments, no returns. She called me the afternoon it arrived. Her voice held together for about 30 seconds before it didn't, and then she cleared her throat and told me it was far too much. I told her it was the smallest fraction of what she'd given me. We stayed on the phone for an hour. I found the house in East Nashville in November, a 1920s craftsman on a corner lot with a wraparound porch, wide plank floors, and a dining room that caught afternoon light until past 4 o'clock. The realtor kept pointing out the updated kitchen. I kept standing in the dining room, measuring the space with my eyes. I commissioned a walnut dining table from a woodworker outside Murfreesboro, 8 feet long, seats 10 comfortably. I stained the bench seats myself on a weekend in January, sleeves rolled up, music playing loud enough that my neighbor could probably hear it. Jordan helped carry the table up the front steps and knocked his shin hard on the corner and swore at me for a full 10 minutes. Sadie brought wine and made us toast the table before anything else was allowed to go on it. That was the rule she invented on the spot, and we followed it. Marco moved in across the street the following spring. A single dad who brought a plate of tamales over when he noticed me doing yard work and introduced himself by saying, "You're going to have to let me know if you want help with those azaleas, because what you're doing right now isn't going to work." He was right. His daughter was in 7th grade and spent Saturday mornings doing art projects on their porch. I waved at her on my morning runs. She reminded me of someone. Friendsgiving in November became a tradition. Jordan cooking turkey ambitiously, and Sadie making cranberry sauce that was inexplicably better than anyone else's version of the same recipe. Marco bringing his daughter and a crock pot of tamales. The table set with mismatched chairs and napkins folded wrong. Aunt Dottie drove up from Beaumont the 2nd year and stayed the weekend. She slept in the guest room, spent Saturday morning at the farmer's market, and was at the table by noon on Sunday like she's always been part of it. Which, I suppose, she had always been. The Third Rail Foundation launched publicly on a Tuesday morning in April. I'd funded the first cohort from acquisition residuals, enough to support 8 full scholarships for low-income students pursuing creative and design programs, with priority for applicants who had faced active opposition from family members about their field of study. That language wasn't in the brochure, but I knew what we were looking for. The first recipient was a girl from Jonesboro, Arkansas, whose parents had thrown away 2 of her sketchbooks because they considered art a dead end. She drove to Nashville for the orientation weekend, sat at the walnut table in my dining room, and looked around quietly for a long time before she said anything. Afterward, I handed her the scholarship letter in person. She said thank you in a voice so careful that I knew she was holding something back, and I understood that completely. Spend the next 4 years building something that belongs to you, I told her. She nodded. I think she heard it. Dr. Mercer, my old typography professor at Belmont, who I'd stayed in touch with across the years, offered to chair the foundation board. Aunt Dottie joined as a community advisor. Sadie ran communications. Jordan built the application portal. It was ours the way Third Rail had always been ours. A little improvised, genuine all the way through, working. One evening in late October, I sat on the porch with a mug of coffee, watching the street settle into dark. Marco's daughter was drawing something in chalk on the sidewalk across the way, headphones on, entirely in her own world. The oak trees had gone amber. Down the block someone was grilling, and the smell of it drifted over, soft and familiar. I thought about a girl in a house in Beaumont, Texas, eating leftover pizza, standing at the kitchen counter on her 10th birthday while someone else's cake cooled on the counter beside her. I thought about a shoebox of colored pencils organized by hue, about a garage that smelled like adhesive vinyl and the low hum of a cutting plotter, and a woman with a braid who handed a 12-year-old a client order and said simply, "Go ahead." I didn't feel sorry for that girl anymore. I didn't feel angry on her behalf. I felt something quieter than that. Grateful, maybe, in the specific way you can only feel grateful for hard things once they're far enough behind you that you can see clearly what they taught you. 480 miles from Beaumont. Not a single regret I could name. Inside, the walnut table sat empty on a Tuesday night, waiting for Sunday, 10 seats. Every one of them spoken for by people who had chosen to show up, who knew my coffee order and my history, and when to ask how I was doing, and when to just sit next to me and let the evening be quiet. That's the table I built. That's the family I have. It turns out you don't need a childhood where someone remembered your birthday to build a life worth having. You just need to survive the one you got. Stay clear about what it cost you, and then get very deliberate about what you do next.